Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. We're happy to see each and every one of you here tonight. Chris Thompson and Joe Penix are attending remotely. We'll begin this evening with a roll call. Alderman John Barrow.
Beg your pardon?
Say here.
Yes. Here.
Into your microphone.
Okay, I didn't get that. What did you repeat?
Just say you're here.
Oh, I'm here. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Alderman Bill Apple.
I'm here.
Alderman J.R. Gorham.
Aquí. Here.
Alderman Joe Penix.
Here.
Thank you. Alderman Chris Thompson.
Present.
Thank you. All right. Again, welcome. We'll begin with an invocation by Reverend Michael Gehring, Main Street United Methodist Church. Pastor Gehring.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we invoke your Spirit's presence to be here with us this evening. Help us to be faithful to the work that is before us, and help us to embody the spirit of the prophet Micah's vision, that we will do justice, that we will love kindness, and that we will walk humbly with our God. Father, our hearts are troubled this evening for the people of Ukraine who are suffering under the onslaught of the Russian army. We pray for them in their time of need. Merciful Lord, we pray for all of our world, a world that is desperately in need of your healing touch. And Father, we thank you for the freedoms that we enjoy and the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us. And we pray that we are just stewards of the gifts that you have given to us. And we ask that you will be with us this evening. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, so tonight we do have a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak on the public hearing, we have speaker cards in the back of the room. So please fill one out and bring it to this table here with our town manager. All right, and if you'd like to speak on any of the other items on the agenda, please do the same. All right, so we will begin with our first public hearing. It's item 1A, Thomas Johnson Jr., agent for owners, requesting a single-phase conditional use rezoning from Highway Business S, which is Highway Business Special Use, and RS 12 to Highway Business Conditional Use for properties located at 1207 South Main Street, containing a total of 2.421 plus or minus acres, and being all of PIN number 6875-49-2125 and 6875-49-3042. The uses requested are motor vehicle repair and maintenance. It is zoning docket K797. We'll be considering the public hearing and then an ordinance. Then we will be considering an ordinance that would rezone said property. We'll begin with a presentation by Community Development Director Catherine Garner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Aldermen. Tonight, our public hearing is at 1207 South Main Street. This is a conditional use district rezoning, which includes the site plan. The rezoning is from Highway Business S and RS 12 to Highway Business Conditional. That special use to conditional use, again, is just a change in verbiage by the state. The use for this site is motor vehicle repair and maintenance, and it does include two parcels that total the 2.421 acres. Discount Tire is proposing to redevelop the former Southern Community Bank site. This is across South Main Street from Lowe's Hardware. This property went through a two-phase rezoning in January of 2000, and then the FDP for the bank site was approved June of that same year. So the purpose of the rezoning is to amend the allowable uses and approve the new site plan for the proposed Discount Tire store. Adjacent zoning districts include highway business, special use, that's the Lowe's and Walmart shopping center across South Main Street, RS12, which is properties to the west, and then institutional and public, which is Triad Baptist across the Wicker Road right-of-way, just to the north. For the Kernersville Development Plan, the site is designated as commercial for the future land use. Commercial businesses in the area are in the personal and household service oriented category, and Kernersville Development Plan and the Land Use Plan encourage redevelopment of vacant properties. So the new site plan for the Discount Tire store would include a 7,680 square foot building. Approximately 1,800 square feet of that would be for display and sales associated with the business. 6 service bays, they do not face onto Main Street, so they would face the back of the property and the stormwater pond. Parking along South Main Street is to be removed, and the new parking along Wicker Road extension would be added. Sidewalks along South Main Street and the portion of Wicker Road extension right here, so just where the building would be located and at the end of the pavement, those would be added. But the site will be accessed using the existing drives on South Main Street and Wicker Road. The ordinance allows applicants to request modifications to the overlay through the conditional use district process, and it is intended to be an option for other alternatives that may meet the intent of the ordinance, but not to the letter of the exact ordinance. The applicant has requested an overlay modification to the strict application of the highway corridor overlay street yards. That to meet that outright, they would have to tear down all of the existing landscaping, which is some really nice mature crepe myrtles, and rebuild with a berm and additional landscaping. But the existing street yard exceeds the minimum already, and is approximately 40 foot wide along South Main Street and 28 foot at the narrowest point. So we believe that keeping the mature vegetation at the width of the buffer that's already meet or exceeding the standards meets the intent of the overlay and would preserve the visual aesthetics of that corridor. These are some of the building elevations. These are renderings, and all of the standards would be reviewed at the time of building permit submittal for conformance, but we have determined that under preliminary review, they do meet all of the aesthetic requirements for building design in the overlay. You'll see that the bay doors open to the south, so they would not front onto Main Street. This is the elevation that you would see on Main Street. And then the east and west elevations as well. The applicant submitted some photos of other buildings that they have developed across the state of North Carolina that do fall within other architectural standards that show that they are willing to meet the architectural standards of our overlay district. The existing Southern Community Bank site was developed as a high-density project, which allows up to 50% impervious covered. The proposed built-upon area for this site is 36.8%. The existing stormwater pond on the southern parcel, shown down here, will be used to treat the stormwater runoff. And so we've spoken with the developers about an option to either recombine the two parcels or place deed restrictions on that southern parcel to maintain the impervious limits on the site, and they have indicated that they will recombine the parcels. This went to the February Planning Board meeting, and Planning Board and staff's recommendation is to approve the request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance and approve the rezoning in case K797 from Highway Business Special Use and RS12 to Highway Business Conditional Use, finding that the proposal is within the goals of the Kernersville Development Plan and the land use plan to redevelop commercial uses and encourage redevelopment and reuse of vacant properties in commercial corridors. The conditional use district site plan, building elevations, and proposed uses address the unique character of the area, and the enhanced building and site design will contribute to the high-quality built environment, especially with the modification request to preserve the existing landscaping. And this was the planning board vote. It carried 7-0.
Are there any questions of Ms. Garner at this time? Okay. So the procedure for a public hearing, many in the room are already familiar with, and it is printed on the agenda. But when an agenda item is denoted as a public hearing, persons attending, whether here, remotely, or sending in a written statement in advance, shall be permitted to address the Board of Aldermen regarding the item under consideration, those speaking in favor speaking first and those against speaking second. Proponents and opponents shall each be given 20 minutes of time to speak and may choose to allow one speaker to utilize that time or may choose to allocate the time among different speakers. If there's presentation, then there's an opportunity for rebuttal. If there's a rebuttal taken, there's a counter rebuttal available. As of right now, I do not see any cards requesting to speak in this public hearing. Have you received any cards? Mr. Hooker, have you received any cards?
No, we have not.
Okay. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak? Wait, hang on. Hang on a minute.
Sure.
At this time, let me declare the public hearing open.
And I'll speak briefly, and I'm sorry I didn't fill out the card.
It's fine.
My name is Tom Johnson. I'm the attorney representing the owner and Discount Tire in connection with this rezoning request. Your staff did an excellent job. Catherine did an excellent job going over the request, and we are in agreement with the conditions that staff has recommended for the rezoning and the site plan. I'm just available to answer any questions you may have because, again, the presentation was excellent. It covered all the points. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And we've got Kelly Wagner here, who's the engineer on the project, if there's an engineering question that he can respond to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Mr. Hooker, have we received any comments as to this public hearing?
We have not.
Matthias, have we received any calls regarding this public hearing item?
No, Mayor, there's no online calls at this moment.
Thank you. All right, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Board members, do you have any questions of the petitioner, Mr. Johnson, or the engineer? Joe or Chris, do you have any questions?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay.
No.
All right. All right, is there any discussion?
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to say I want to commend Mr. Johnson and his clients as well as the planning board and the planning staff for doing the common sense approach to preserve the existing streetscaping, landscaping, because, you know, that's a good example of all the members of the team trying to do what's within the spirit of the ordinance, even if it may not be within the letter of it. It's really better than the ordinance. And I want to commend everybody who's been involved in that process. I think it's great.
All right, given that this is a remote meeting, we would vote with a roll call, but first I would need a motion.
I'll motion to approve
Okay, I've got a
as
motion.
written by staff.
Got a motion to approve the rezoning and site plan with conditions as recommended by staff from Alderman Thompson. I have a second from Alderman Apple. John Barrow, do you vote in favor or against?
I'd vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Apple?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hooker, is that a sufficient roll call?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
And Madam Mayor, since Mr. Johnson is present, we could have him sign the conditions page while he's here.
You traveled here from Raleigh, right? Do you have the conditions page?
It's in my office.
I actually have it, and I left a couple copies out there in front of Ed Powell, the attorney. There should be 2 copies of that out
all
there
right.
for Mr. Johnson to sign.
All right, it's unanimous. When do you expect to start working on this? Actually, I'll let you speak at the microphone so Chris and Joe can hear. And Mr. Johnson, you can come forward and get the papers.
So usually Discount Tire will move pretty quickly. Once we know all entitlements are done, the design phase with the team, they'll kick off the civil engineering and the building architecture concurrently. That's usually anywhere from a 6 or 7 week process to get through the design and start permitting through the town to obtain all of our necessary permits. And usually they will go to construction as soon as they get permits.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you. We appreciate the investment in our community.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're looking forward to being part of it.
Thank you.
It should look really nice with the existing vegetation as Councilmember Apple mentioned.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Swisher, anything else on this item? Okay, our next is speakers from the floor. I have Ms. Clara Vaught signed up to speak. If you could restate your name, you do not have to give your address.
My name is Claire Vogt, and thank you so much for letting me come and speak. First, I would like to give a huge thank you to our town hall members and employees. Mr. Ed Powell was amazing. This past week, I homeschooled my youngest son, and he's in the classical conversations community, and we were allowed to come in and observe court. And everyone was so welcoming. The judge was wonderful, spoke with all of the students, and the event really sparked some great conversations within the students afterwards. We went to lunch together, and those questions kind of got me thinking. The youth were very engaged and amazed at our facility. Some of our youth in our community live here in Kernersville, others live in Oak Ridge, and they wanted to know more about what went on at Town Hall. They didn't even really realize that we had a courthouse, that cases were heard here. They thought you had to go into Winston or into Greensboro, and it wasn't necessarily as welcoming in those facilities to other youth that had been in those facilities before. And it kind of got me thinking, and I started doing a little bit of research on what type of youth programs we have here within Town Hall where youth could be engaged a little bit more with our local leaders in our community. And I really couldn't find a whole lot. I found some programs within the police department as well as within the fire department. And I know that our Rotary program has like a youth version of Leadership Kernersville, which I think is fantastic, but it may not be as comprehensive as to understand exactly, let's say, what the town manager does, what are the full responsibilities of an alderman, what does our clerk do, what all these jobs are, because it's a big building. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little embarrassed. I couldn't answer all of those questions. And it just kind of got me thinking, is that something that we might consider doing? kind of creating almost like a youth membership or mentorship program that students who are interested in political science, local politics, to understand how to get involved and that route in which to do so. Because, we really need our youth to be invested. We need them to be invested young so that they stay invested as they are able to vote. I know that our local elections do not typically have a high yield of turnout for voters. And I think that's a shame. And if there's a way that we can engage these kids at a younger age, then I would like to know, let's start a conversation on how we could do that. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really necessarily know what that looks like, but it's something I would just like to bring to the board. And I may not be following the correct protocol. But we just had this event last week, and I knew there was a meeting this week, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to show up, and I've never hesitated to just speak out. So this is me just kind of presenting that idea, and I'd love to start a conversation on what that would look like. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the 2021 annual reports and 2022 budget requests. Tonight we've got Paul J. Senior Botanical Garden represented and the Kernersville Museum. We'll start with the Botanical Garden.
Good evening. My name is Adrienne Rothling, Director for Paul J. Senior Botanical Garden at 215 South Main Street, Kernersville, North Carolina, 27284. On behalf of several members of the board and staff that are with us here tonight, I am presenting to you our 2021 annual report, or 2021 at a glance. While the past 2 years has certainly been a challenge for everybody in this room, we have learned how to stay above water. 2020 reduced operations to essential staff and projects, but in 2021, we started climbing. We showed the town an opportunity, especially for us, to get people excited about outdoors, being outdoors, to inspire the next generation and to really show off gardening at its full potential. And in all honesty, this isn't a 2021 at a glance. This is like the last 6 months of 2021 at a glance, because that's when we really made some strides. So our visitorship certainly did climb. Garden events started happening again, and event rentals even were coming back. You could see how many of the corporate and weddings we had. And then one of our biggest things was having tours back present at the garden, not only for adults, garden clubs, but for children too. This is Josh giving a presentation, our virtual tour or our off-site tour at the App State Academy, which is actually a connection we made with date night through the Chamber of Commerce. Somebody came to visit that night and approached Josh about coming to the school to do a presentation. So here we're taking the garden on the road. We also seen a climb in our volunteer hours. We were glad to report 900 hours by all our volunteers. We have over 70 of them present at the garden. Some do one a year because they're teachers and they can only work on weekends, and we might only have a plant sale that weekend. But then others come in almost every other day or every other week just to come and say hi and be with other well-minded people, like-minded people. We also continue to work with the community on so many levels. We are certainly hosting a lot of blood drives. Last year, we had 418 pints that were received by blood donors. We also donate approximately 1,000 pounds of produce grown in those 4 raised beds out front by the road. And those are small beds. Can you imagine trying to grow 1,000 pounds of produce in one season? We really love working with the Chamber of Commerce on all kinds of aspects. You can see all the things we do with the Chamber. Josh and I are part of the leadership Kernersville Day Chairs along with Kelly. Next week, we're going to be hosting History Day. So this is Josh taking everyone on a tour. And Josh took part in the spelling bee last year. And I'm so proud they used my photo that I took of Carl, actually, from Caddyshack. That's his nickname. And then we also hosted, for Leadership Kernersville, we hosted Law Enforcement Day. That was such a fun day. And we're so looking forward to having you all come back. They turned our entire garden into a forensics lab. It was really cool. Along with the Leadership Kernersville, we have Music at Twilight, Women in Business, Lunch with Leaders. Notice everybody's sitting in the shade back here. And then thanks to Jim Waddell and Target, they donated seeds, and we know exactly how to get those seeds in the young kids' hands. So Spring Folly, which actually occurred in September last year, we were there and we gave away every single seed they had. And in addition to the seeds that we grow at our own gardens. We worked with many groups this year, last year with Scouts, both Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. This is Jake Pretty. He was interested in turning one of our garden themes into a monarch way station, so he went ahead and did that. We have lots of native plants and then lots of milkweed or butterfly weed on the property. The minimum was to get 10 species, and we achieved that, no problem. And then he built those butterfly houses too, so that they can find sanctuary from predators. And then the Girl Scouts made flowers out of plastic bottles for our spectacular holiday blooms. If you haven't seen it, you've certainly missed out. And then they made seed kits. Kernersville Little Theater came back and did a performance out at our gardens. I love this connection because they introduced us to Charlie with Vintage Light and Sound. Charlie did a great job bringing the moon in for us that night. And we hosted our first movie on the lawn, partnered with Aperture, brought in over 100 people to enjoy the movie that evening. Adult rated, of course, because it was 9:00 at night. We partnered with Twin City Artisans and the Purple Wagon events, and we have craft fairs at the garden. Winston-Salem Journal came out and featured us a couple of times last year. One was for the Kerner's Folly Victorian Parlor series. Josh is here talking about herbs, how to dry herbs, preserve herbs, and use herbs in different tinctures. Here's Josh for that article. And then, of course, we also partnered with the Folly on decorating the room. We got 4th place this year, but that's okay. Staff and volunteers were dedicated to doing it again. And staff, I mean me, and volunteers, I mean my sister, because we really liked the Folly. Kernersville newspaper came out and did a feature on all the front doors in Kernersville, and we were one of the winners for the 4th of July. We use recycled materials out of the garden. Those are giant ornamental onions that we spray paint to look like fireworks. And then, of course, the plant geek in me still needs to show off all these lovely plants. So we had some goslings in the garden. We had this Dutch iris, and this is voodoo lily, and it smells just as bad as it looks. We had a wonderful tulip display, and we're going to have another wonderful tulip display for our spectacular tulip blooms. We have over 18,000 tulips and daffodils coming into bloom. Josh's little sister, for her birthday, decided to have a fundraiser at the garden, and all the proceeds went to the tulip blooms. And then the Leadership Kernersville, as a fundraiser, did raffle baskets for us. And there's the tulip display. If you haven't seen it, come around tax day, and you'll see them in full glory. We have a lot of new programs, to the thanks of our new programs officer, Kristen, who you might be familiar with from the Folly, but she brought in a very young, fresh perspective and started blowing up our children's programming. So she was instrumental in doing our discovery camps, kinder music, and story time. And then there's just going to be more and more. All those things are about bringing that younger generation in. So we tie-dyed shirts. They all got their own camp shirts. They harvested vegetables right out of the garden, made some salsa and some other goodies. And then we did a lot of exploring in the gardens where we hunted for pollinators, we made pollinators, we sowed seeds. And then, of course, there they are in their camp shirts. And thank you to all our wonderful sponsors. They were featured on Facebook, and of course, every single kid made a thank you letter, and we sent them out to all the sponsors. Carol is one of our new volunteers who has been teaching kinder music and story time in the garden. She's very animated. If you haven't come, you need to come see her. Even if you just want to come and see what she does. She started with 25 kids and it went to 40 in like 2 months. And then, of course, we don't want to leave out the adults. We have a lot more programs for the adults. We had Tai Chi in the garden last year, and we did a wreath making workshop. Not only did I do one at the garden, I also did one for Gypsy Road Brewery. We had a lot of fun. Again, that plant geek in me wants to show off some really cool plants. So a couple years ago when I was here, I was showing off the cactus. This year, I wanted to show off the hardy banana. It actually flowered last year, and it set fruit. Unfortunately, the fruit did not make it through the winter. It didn't mature enough. John and Bobby Wolf concert series came back last year. We were so happy to have Charlie bring the moon back out for us that night, but we had a crowd of over 100, and they really enjoyed the sounds of bluegrass sassafras from Wilkesboro. Thank you to our sponsors, and thank you to our partnerships with Gypsy Road, Rockin' Moroccan, and of course, Solace and Edward Jones. Kernersville newspaper right there again, helping us out, giving us some features in the newspaper. And there's Bobby in the middle. I don't know if oh, there we go. So again, plant geek in me. This is another flower that smells just as bad as it looks. As you can see, it's pollinated by houseflies, showing off the pollinators area in the garden. We continue to develop the gardens and do these wonderful things with recycled curbing from the church across the street that we finally laid it to rest in the garden. We made this wonderful pathway in the Japanese garden. And in the lowland meadow, where all the plants in there like it wet, so they have like wet feet. And in case you were all wondering, because I know you've been asking about those dancing cranes, the last 2 years certainly has been a challenge to raise money. And then of course, now that we're finding prices are skyrocketing, what that did was allowed our designers to go in and kind of redesign to get our costs a little low, keeping down not only for the sake of the development of the garden, but just, in keeping with our natural look of the gardens too. So we have a really good new design, and hopefully we'll see this coming really, really soon. They need to go into their permanent homes in the garden. We've had a lot of media exposure. I'm sure I've already shared most of you, the Kernersville newspaper. I wanted to show you some other things. We were featured in the Kernersville Community Guide along with the museum and the Kerner's Folly. We were also in Garden and Gun magazine this year, and hopefully some of you got a chance to see that. And my husband's here, and Ronaldo Gardens was featured in that same article. So if you were wondering about that photo in the very beginning, due south, that is a trained topiary tree by an artist from South Carolina who came and trained that tree. And Josh is carving that top of that tree into a nice heart. We were on Deborah Noel, and she is coming back this spring. She's going to do a feature just on the garden, but when she was here, she was talking about Kernersville, so I'm looking forward to them coming back. Of course, I was on the show with Eric many times last year. We were talking about cold weather, and we've also talked about the bulbs. Jim Longworth has been doing his TV show for the last almost year and a half in our foyer. So he is a mover and shaker in Kernersville, always mentioning the home of Paul J. Senior Botanical Garden. There he is with Daggett and Schuler. And then here is our spectacular holiday bloom. So all this has led up to an amazing display of bottles turned into flowers. So it's all made in-house by our volunteers, by our staff, turning those bottles into flowers that look like something real. And so here's our volunteers getting ready, putting all the flowers out. Those are the tulips. Those are more tulips. These are the girls making the tulips. And just at Christmas time alone, they put in over 100 hours. And even staff, and even Greg Senior was out there. David was too, but I don't have a picture of David. But a lot of people will ask me, how can you tell David and Greg apart? And Greg always has a tool in his hand. So that's how I tell them apart. Or in his pocket, I guess. But there's the staff out there. And again, partnering with the Kernersville Museum and Kerner's Folly on Yuletide Christmas. I don't think I can go back. There we go. So they have the skating rink, and then of course go see the museum, doing all kinds of things for shop business Saturday. And then I wanted to show off this other photo. Go back. There's Josh and that groundhog again. I don't get it. I don't get why Josh attracts them. But he came out to help us decorate that day. And then, of course, a big shout out to WXII, who's had me do a Zoom call with them many times. And just, again, Winston-Salem Journal, Life in the Carolinas, even the Heart of the Triad Chorale came out and visited us and actually sang at the Christmas display. And this is what it all looked like at the end. And all these bigger flowers you see are plastic bottles down the middle, plastic bottles on the side, plastic bottles hanging from the gazebo. It was just a sight to see. We had over 3,500 visitors during the 6-week period that the lights were lit. We even had a proposal out there. I know Kelly had one too. Thank you to all our sponsors for Christmas. We enjoyed having you and partnering with you. And these are some of the comments that we received on Facebook or on Google reviews, just how wonderful the display was because we use recycled bottles. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Board of Aldermen. Thank you, Mayor Morgan. And thank you, Joe and Chris at home. Thanks.
Thank you, Adrian. Does anyone have any questions? Joe or Chris, do you have questions?
No, thank you very much, Adrian.
Thank you. Joe?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, the next item. Thank you for the great presentation. The next item is the Kernersville Museum 2022 Information and Funding Request. Kelly?
Hey there. Good afternoon. Good evening, I guess. It's hard to go after Adrian. She's got so much energy. I get tired. Thank you to the Board of Aldermen and the mayor and the town manager for allowing the nonprofits to speak tonight. And thank you to the members of our board of directors who are here or who are here who have called in or listening. We've got a couple that are sick who wanted to be here, so but that's okay. We're cool with that. So as we began 2021, like the garden and the folly too, there was a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of hope that we would get to start gathering again safely. For the museum, 2021 was really marked by this push for community. We just wanted to gather again. And so that was our main focus this year, is to try to figure out ways to gather together and gather safely together. And we started out, dipped our toes in the water with the first event we did, I think, was date night, downtown date night with the chamber. Went off really well, so we were like, okay, we can start doing events again. One of the first big events we did was the History Mystery Hunt. Dale and I got together from the Folly. May is Historic Preservation Month. And so we were like, how can we get folks downtown, outside, and around our historical houses and landmarks in downtown Kernersville? So we decided to do a scavenger hunt. It started at the museum, ended at the Folly, and it was a race that we did not realize how fast folks would go through it. But we really enjoyed getting together and doing a joint event together. We ended up having about 66 participants in that event, and we had folks coming from out of town to participate. So it was a lot of fun. We had folks dress up. They were so cute. They really enjoyed getting to go through downtown Kernersville and seeing all the things that were out there. It was a great family event and great team building event for a lot of folks. So we were very proud of that event and proud of how well it went. And as you can see, we had even some businesses get together and get a team together. So that was a lot of fun. Then the next, of course, we try to do exhibits every year. We did a new exhibit this year. That was one of the two new exhibits we did was Kernersville Through the Decades. But our biggest and probably most anticipated event was the opening of the time capsule. Of course, the town buried a time capsule in 1971. It was supposed to be opened in March. Due to COVID, there was a lot of conversations back and forth. We worked closely with the town of Kernersville Parks and Rec. I worked with the mayor and with Curtis and tried to figure out what's it going to look like when we dig this up, what's in there. We had notebooks, historic records of how they buried it, what it might be, but we really didn't know. Didn't know what it was going to look like, really didn't know how the whole thing was going to play out. So it was a fun event. We got together, This is the look on Curtis's face when he realized that we were not going to be able to dig it up by hand and we may need some extra help. So text came in from the town. It took a lot. It was a lot heavier than we thought it was going to be. But we got it pulled up. And as many of you probably know, there were 200 personal letters in that time capsule, along with all kinds of other things. We honestly, in all the records, it was like, there's going to be some things from churches. We had no idea. It was a treasure trove of information and things, and it was very unique. We had a lot of comments from folks who absolutely loved our time capsule. They'd gone to other towns' time capsule openings. Ours was very personal, and folks really, really liked that. It was very neat. So it was a really neat event, and I don't know if you guys can tell from this picture, but underneath, beside my feet, there's a lot of water. It was a lot of water in the time capsule, but we got through it, and most everything in it came out in really good condition. So we worked with the town about how we're going to give these letters back, because they were lots of letters to descendants. When people wrote those letters, they were saying to my grandchildren, didn't think about grandchildren moving out, moving away, how many grandchildren there would be. So as we pulled all of this stuff out, we just had our hands full. But we got, as of today, we only have 3 letters left that are not with a home. All the other letters have found their ways to the families, so we're very proud of that. We offered to digitize a lot of letters. Most folks didn't take us up on it. They were really personal, but we were very, very happy to be a part of getting those memories back to those folks. So it was really special to us. One of the things we pulled out of the time capsule was a cassette tape of oral histories. It was about 90 minutes on each side, and it was full. We could not listen to it because it kind of stretched out with the heat. Luckily, we were working with Duke University before we opened the time capsule. We had some information that they wanted. And so I was talking to them just off the, about what they needed from us, and was telling them, we opened this time capsule, we've got this cassette. And they said, hey, give it to us. We'll digitize it for you, give it back. And they did. They didn't charge us anything. They moved super fast on it, and they were able to preserve all that for us. So that was a really nice partnership we had with Duke for that. So it was exciting. And now the other exhibit we did was the time capsule exhibit. So kind of neat. Hope folks will come by and check that out in the museum. Another thing we did during this same weekend was the Storytellers event. It was a really nice event. David Fitzpatrick emceed it for us. We had Mr. Harrison, Ned Mabe, and Danny Dillon, and they came and talked about their time growing up in Kernersville. It's a twofold thing for us, because we want to preserve their stories and make sure we have their oral histories, but we love the community aspect of it. So as you can see, it was a great event, a lot of great stories. It started a series for us that we're going to continue to do. So we hope you guys will check that out. Let's see. The next big thing we did was the Haunted Kernersville release party. So we had a book come out in August. All the proceeds from the book benefit Kernersville. It's really nice to have a book that has a lot of the history of Kernersville and a little bit of haunted stories. And it really kind of showcases the uniqueness of Kernersville. Book sales have gone really well. It's been really beneficial for the museum. And we have people coming in monthly, probably weekly, to buy the book. So we've been very pleased with that. Of course, we did our 4th annual chicken stew by the end of October. COVID was trying to kick back up again, so we ended up making this a drive-through event, but we sold just as many tickets this year as we did last year, and it was just as good as ever. So if you missed the chance to get the chicken stew tickets, you really miss out, because everybody loves it. And then, of course, we did ghost tours again, which offers people the opportunity to walk through downtown Kernersville and get scared, get good and scared. But we have a lot of people come in from out of town, so we really love that event. As always, it was spooky. And of course, we did Halloween again, and we were so excited to get to see folks in downtown and get to interact with kids and just be a part of downtown. You could tell that everybody was ready to be back in the community. There's one of our favorite pictures. The kids are hilarious. And then we did Hometown Christmas, and we rounded out our year with Hometown Christmas. And this year was super exciting for us. We did, I think we had 25 trees. Oh, it's always a place for families. We had just such a good time with so many different families coming in. We had 25 trees adopted by local businesses and community organizations. If you didn't get by to see them, maybe, there they are. It's very magical for us. And so every year we try to think of a way to make it bigger and better. This year we added more trees. So we had so many unique businesses and folks come in and make their trees just super special. And we love watching people discover it and come in and walk around and tell us how much they enjoy just getting to see it. And they love the atmosphere. That's one of our favorite trees was the DAR tree. It was really neat. And then this year we actually had the weaning cabin was adopted by Rick and Beth Pearson. They turned the weaning cabin into Candy Lane Cottage. And so it was just another free thing for folks to get to do. The chamber took advantage and did story time with Santa on our front porch. Santa was in. You can see the cottage was all decked out. It was amazing. You can see the tree. They just did an amazing job, and Beth Pierce did it in like one day. But kids loved it. We had just a great time. Again, the chamber used it with Santa. He came and did all pictures, and the kids, of course, loved it. And we would find candy all over the place, and I think kids tried to eat it, but it's okay. Nobody got sick. And then, of course, we added the light tunnel, and we had people making memories, getting engaged, family pictures, just continuing to try to be a place in town where folks come and enjoy the museum and get a little piece of history and a little piece of community. So we appreciate it. We appreciate the support from the town, and we thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there any questions? All right, no questions. Thank you. Wonderful presentation. A lot of great activities planned this year by the museum and by the gardens. It really has contributed to a great place to be in Kernersville in any season, as we've seen from those beautiful pictures and slides. Just before we move on, everyone who's here with the garden or with the museum, could you stand? There's a lot of great volunteers in the room tonight. Thank you. We appreciate everything everyone has done this year. Thank you. All right, item C is discussion and consideration of the purchase of real property located at 1223 Union Cross Road and Shields Road. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, property is on the screen there. Give you an idea. I think everyone knows where it is, but 1223 Union Cross Road. Basically, if you're at the stoplight of Union Cross and Shields Road and you're going south and you turn on to Shields Road, 1223 Union Cross Road is the field on the right. It basically goes all the way down Shields Road. It touches the town property there where the cross country course is, and it goes over on Union Cross Road over to the Fieldcrest subdivision. 0 Shields Road is the property that is right next to the Tredegar subdivision. Those two parcels together, 1223 Union Cross Road is approximately 52.45 acres, more or less. And 0 Shields Road is approximately 13.4 acres, more or less. So what we have is right at 65.65 acres, more or less. As you all know, the town has been working with the property owner over the past year and a half, 2 years on this property to try to purchase the property in some way, shape, or form. It was at one time the town was looking at possibly entering into a development agreement for a portion of the property that would be on the corner of Union Cross and Shields Road, for a portion of that property there to be developed, and then the town would buy the remainder of the property. That would have yielded about 45 acres of the 65. The board changed direction in that and decided it was probably in the best interest of the town to try and purchase all 65 acres. As I mentioned earlier, all of this property is contiguous to Ivy Redmond Park and the existing park there. It is divided, the parcel beside Tredegar. We have a road, Beeson Road, kind of splits it. Future plans would probably would relocate Beeson Road over, and then the property would all be contiguous. Currently, as you all know, Ivy Redmond is probably our largest active park, meaning that, we use it for hosting tournaments, adult soccer leagues, youth soccer, softball, baseball, kickball, cross country. Give you an idea of what we have out there. We have about 40 tournaments, baseball or softball, one or the other. We have about 40 tournaments a year out there. We take June or July, one of the two off, and then usually December and January and February. We'll start back late February, early March. So we host about 40 to 50 tournaments. Those tournaments usually draw 1,500 people every weekend. And over the period of the tournament season in economic, it's kind of an economic driver. We anticipate it brings in about $4 million to the town in terms of folks that come in and spend money on gas, they spend money on food, spend money on hotel rooms. So the baseball and softball tournaments, they drive a lot of folks to the town. We have several cross-country meets. I think we had about 35 last year. We have two large meets. One of them has about 6,000 people there in one day. The other one has about 10,000 people there in one day. So they're driving somewhere in those one-day meets about $150,000 in economic boost to the town. We have currently 40 to 50 teams in adult soccer league. In adult softball league, I believe, as well. So it is an active park. We have plans for expansion of the park. Also, that is where we're currently proposing on the 28 acres that we currently own up near Shields Road. We're currently proposing the Parks and Recreation Center go there. So with all that in mind, the board thought that it was a better idea to buy the land so that we're not mixing park and a large residential housing development. We've looked. It's currently the way that land is currently zoned. You could build about 154 homes on that 65-acre tract. And on the parcel beside Tredegar, there would be a road connection made. That there's been a plan approved that does include a road connection from that parcel into Tredegar. So you would have a lot of cut-through traffic. I think the board thought and town staff thought that that's really not in the future would not be a good mix to have that many homes with the park right there. So the board instructed staff to try and purchase the property without doing a development agreement for the corner. We have met with the property owner. It's been a process of about 2 or 3 months. And we've met with the property owner. Keep in mind, this is the third time we've tried to purchase this property since 2005. Property owner has owned it since that time, or 2006. So we finally reached an agreement with the property owner. All 65.6 acres, whatever it may be, 65.65, more or less, for $6 million. So he has agreed to sell the property for $6 million. You have in your packet a resolution and a contract for the $6 million. If the board so chooses to approve that tonight, the mayor will sign it tonight. We will send that along to the property owner. There are 2 different property owners listed, but it's the same person. One of them, the 13-acre tract is in his company's name, and the 52-acre tract is in his name. So some discussion has been, obviously $6 million, where we're going to pay for that, because I will tell you this, with very few exceptions, it is a non-revocable contract, meaning that when you approve it, when we sign it, you bought it, unless there's some environmental issues on it that he does not mitigate, or unless we can't get clean title to it. And I do not anticipate either of those being a problem. So the funding, several different options. You'll see later in the agenda, we have received $1 million from the state for purchase of parkland. I would recommend, and I am recommending in the packet, that you approve that $1 million to go toward this purchase price. That will leave $5 million. We anticipate a savings from general government services in this fiscal year of about $4 million. The way that works is we are allowed to use the ARPA money to fund general government services. So we will fund general government services with that, and we anticipate a savings in return from that. That will require a budget amendment at some point in probably July or August, probably August. But either way, whether that happens or not, once that contract's executed, the board is at that point will be responsible for purchasing it. If that does not work out, we will go through the typical method that we use, which would be we would finance part of the property, go to the bank, get a loan on it, and finance it. So that's all I have on that property. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have regarding the resolution, anything in the resolution or anything in the contract. I will tell you that we loaded the resolution up on Friday. We loaded the contract up very late today. It was about 5:30. That was not because we were stalling. That was because we did not have the contract finalized until about 5:30. We were negotiating some points of the contract with the seller until that time. But basically what you have in the resolution that was loaded on Friday is about the same that you have in the contract. It's just some more technical stuff in the contract. But the meat of the purchase price and everything is in the resolution as well as in the contract. So be glad to answer any questions anyone may have regarding that purchase and the property that is out there. We will, in addition to the $6 million, we are having a survey done. So we will be responsible for that. Of course, deed preparation, and we will probably get a phase 1 environmental study done. The seller is looking to see if he has one. He has not yet found it, but he has told me if he does have it and he finds it, he'll let us have it so we won't have to bear that cost.
Thank you for your work in negotiating that, Curtis and Ed, and for John Wolf's efforts on the prior attempts to purchase this property. It is appreciated. We do have a speaker signed up. At this time, I'd like to recognize David Fitzpatrick. And I need to stop you for just a moment because the microphone is not on. There you go. Thank you.
Ms. Mayor, Board of Aldermen, thank you for the opportunity to speak for just a moment. Every 5 years, I resurface and give a history lesson of land, especially this land here. That rectangle is our property, our family property. It's been in our family for over 100 years. 25 years ago, what now is Ivy Redmond Park was part of our family as well, our land that we owned. We sold it to the town 25 years ago for $10,000 an acre. Shows what happens in a town when there's growth and prosperity and future thinking. I've always said every 5 years when somebody's trying to buy land or try to develop that land, I've always said that it is the crown jewel of Kernersville. It is the gateway of Kernersville. There is no more attractive piece of property in this area than the land that we're talking about today on both sides of Shields Road. I had the opportunity to talk to Amy Pope and Mike Stennett today as well. And they give their endorsement and blessings in this opportunity. And it is an opportunity. My mom always taught us to be good stewards of our land. We did not approach the town 25 years ago to sell our land. The town did, and actually it was a big event. If you will remember, 25 years ago, I think there was a vote, and the town turned that land down. But the Board of Aldermen had the foresight to even go against what was voted on and said, look, this is just an opportunity that can develop into many parks and opportunities for recreation for our town. And they took the chance and purchased the property. That's the history lesson to it. Who knows what will happen 25 years from now with land. I will try to follow what my mom has taught me in that Beeson Farm, and that we will continue to be good stewards of our land. And I think Mike and Amy will continue to do the same, to hang on that land so that we can, so it can still be attractive. So we appreciate the town and their forward thinking, and we give our endorsement as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who's called in to speak on this topic?
No, ma'am, no one has called in to speak on this topic.
Thank you. Mr. Hooker, have we received any written comments?
No, we have not.
Thank you. I did receive a few emails on this, and I think that all the aldermen have received them as well. They don't appear to have been submitted as comments for this meeting, though, so I will not read them. But they were both in support. All right. Does Mr. Swisher provided a lot of information? Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Swisher? Okay. Chris or Joe, do you have any questions of Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor, I have no questions, but I do have some comments. Can you hear me?
I can. Please go ahead. And this is Joe Penix for the minutes.
I've thought about this property for a long time, and I think it will go down as one of the most memorable votes that we ever take with this board. Sometimes I get emotional thinking about it, because I want to leave this town in the best condition that we can, and I'm the last member of my family to live here. And Parks and Recreation has always been at the forefront of my thoughts and planning. I think that it's a big decision. It is a hefty price to pay, but I think it will just solidify the importance of Kernersville in the state of North Carolina. I think a lot of us have been to the sites of other big parks in North Carolina and recreation, and in South Carolina. Rock Hill has made itself known to all of the people in the United States as a site for activities for the youth, for the elderly, for the disabled. And I think we can do the same thing in Kernersville, North Carolina. I think it is a wonderful opportunity for Kernersville to be recognized. And instead of having hundreds of apartments or hundreds of housing in, as David said, the gateway to Kernersville, and that section will be the entrance to our town. The things we can do with that land are unending. If it's planned right, we can make that a beautiful entrance to the town of Kernersville. And I urge all my fellow aldermen to vote in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penix. Mr. Thompson, do you have any comments? I'll come back to you, Mr. Barrow. Do you have any questions or comments?
I would only echo what Joe said, and I learned something tonight from David. I've probably known him most of my life. I didn't know that particular thing about his family and the original part. That's good stuff. Thank you, David, for sharing that with us. One of my main concerns, of course, is that we provide for the youth of Kernersville going forward. That seems to be my pet peeve, and I think this project goes a long way. This purchase will go a long way towards making that happen and being able to sustain it into the future. And I would urge the other aldermen to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Apple, do you have any comments or questions?
I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I want to say to the public and to the other members of the board, to the mayor, what an honor it is to be able to be a part of this board that actually votes on this decision. I will tell you, when we came to town 21 years ago now, one of the things that really stood out about Kernersville was the attention that was given to parks, recreation, and green space. And for those of you who've lived here all of their lives, like Alderman Penix and Alderman Barrow have, maybe it's not as prominent a characteristic of a town as it is to those who move into the town since that time. And I don't want us to overlook the value of this purchase and of the continued development of this park. I don't want us to underlook the value of that toward the economic development of this town. Those of you who've had the privilege of being involved in economic development activities, as I have in this county and in another county, you recognize that the CEOs and the decision makers of significant corporate employers absolutely give tremendous weight to the quality of life in a community. I would submit that the quality of life in Kernersville is unparalleled. I know that you think that as well, but I think that it's something that we've got to continue to nurture. And the parks and recreation emphasis and the emphasis that's given to this park, its exposure, and the dollars that are spent in town, whether it's for lodging or for food or gas or merchandise or whatever, have a significant impact and really are multiplied. They multiply the value of this initial investment. So let's not overlook that. And the more CEOs and planners that are developed with significant employers that are impressed by our quality of life, the better jobs we're able to provide for our citizens, not just in terms of the quality of the jobs, but in terms of the level of average compensation with those jobs. So I think it's extremely and equally and maybe more important that we provide it for our children for the next few generations. But I think it's equally important that we note the significant economic impact that this investment is going to have on the town of Kernersville. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham?
Yes, I concur with everything that's been said thus far tonight in regards to the property that we are purchasing here for this great community. I think it's absolutely awesome. However, I do want to make sure that we don't just focus all our attention on the southern part of Kernersville, but that we continue to look to the north too, because we have youth in that area too going forward, that we still give thought to how we can enhance the lives of our youth in the northern part of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Yes, I apologize. I was muted. I was talking away, but I was muted. I guess I feel like we're a big part of history tonight with the decision that's going to be possibly made on this park. The decision we're making for future generations of children, kids, adults with this land. I agree with everything everyone's spoken about tonight, and it being a gateway and the crown jewel of Kernersville. We find ourselves in a very fortunate situation that we've tried to get a hold of this land for well, I think Curtis said 3 times over the last 20 years or so. And thank goodness we're in a position now that we actually can follow through with this and make something of it. I like the fact that this is right in the middle of the growth that's going on in Caleb's Creek, as well as the growth that's going on around the rest of Kernersville. So it's a great spot, and I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. I agree. This is a historic decision, a historic moment for Kernersville. Having small neighborhood parks is a wonderful thing, and Kernersville has many of them. But the decision back in the day to purchase Beeson Park and to start the park here has allowed Kernersville to have a central park that is of a size that can accommodate activities and interests of everyone who lives in Kernersville. The youth sport fields that are there, including the baseball and softball fields, the soccer fields, the cross-country course, which has attracted runners from all over the state and including collegiate runners in the ACC for tournaments, has been outstanding. Residents go to the dog park that Mr. Penix initially proposed for the park and enjoy it every day for that. People walk there. We can have a large community gathering like National Night Out there. There's been just a variety of wonderful events that have happened in the park, and preserving this land for park uses has endless possibilities for the future of Kernersville. It's a park we can be proud of. It's a park for our youth. It's a park for our families. It's a park for everyone in Kernersville. And this is a great day for Kernersville to have the opportunity to consider purchasing this land for future generations and for now for the town of Kernersville. And again, I wanted to express my appreciation to the town staff, Parks and Rec Director, and everybody who's worked so hard on the existing park and for these future possibilities for this park. At this time, I'd like to see if there's a motion.
So moved.
Motion.
I would like to make a motion.
All right, Chris, would you defer to Mr. Penix?
I do.
I would be happy to.
Okay,
And
Mr.
I'll second.
Penix, let's hear your motion.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to make a motion that we purchase the said land for the price agreed upon, and that we go through this project for the history of the town of Kernersville.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Thompson. All those in, well, we're going to do a roll call vote. Making history there too. Mr. Barrow, do you vote in favor or opposed?
I vote in favor, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Apple?
I enthusiastically vote in favor, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham? Affirmative. Mr. Thompson?
Yes, thank you.
In favor?
In favor, yes. And I have one comment once the vote's completed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Penix?
I vote in favor, and I would like to add a comment. I am proud to be on the Board of Aldermen that is interested in the forward taking to make Kernersville a greater place to live.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, your comment?
I want to reiterate what you said, Mayor Morgan. I want to thank staff, and I'd also like to thank Curtis, Ed, and John Wolf for a lot of work for many years on this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, is there anything else you need on this one, Curtis? Okay, and we have the papers, so I'll be signing the agreement at the conclusion of this meeting. All right, Mr. Swisher?
I've got one thing, but go ahead and take the vote, and I'll bring up a different issue.
I did a roll call vote.
Oh, okay. My bad. I missed that. Two things. First of all, I would like to thank the board for the action that you have taken tonight. I've sat in your seat, and I know it's no easy task to vote to spend $6 million on vacant land. But I appreciate you doing that and looking forward into the future, as Mr. Barrow said, what it will do for the kids in the future to come. I think it was a wise decision. It was definitely a tough decision, but I appreciate your vote on that. And I appreciate this board and the board before you that has hung in there and stuck with it and tried to work something out so that we could get this. I appreciate the board supporting the staff in doing that. Again, it was no quick road, no short road, but I appreciate the board staying behind the project. Property owner also appreciates the board staying behind the project. He was looking forward to selling it. He had wanted to sell it to the town in the beginning, and one thing led to another and never came together on the terms and the price. So I appreciate the board staying with the project and ultimately seeing it through. The one thing, as you all know, and I mentioned earlier, the recreation center that has been approved is currently proposed to go at the corner of Beeson Road and Shields Road. If the board would like to possibly look into the feasibility of relocating that recreation center to the corner or to the intersection there of Union Cross and Shields Road, so that basically when you're coming into town on Union Cross Road, it is the first thing you see right after you see, or right before you see the Kernersville sign. If the board would like to look at the feasibility of doing that, if you would so vote to give us authority to look at that, then we will start that process and then report back to the board what we find as far as the feasibility. We don't know what's involved as far as grading or any of that, but if the board would like to look at doing that, we will have our contractor check on that.
Could you go ahead and give us a recommended motion?
I would, if you're inclined to do so, I would just recommend that the board make the motion to allow staff to look at the feasibility of relocating the recreation center to the corner of Union Cross and Shields Road.
And report back to the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do I have that motion?
I'd make that motion.
I make that motion.
Got a motion by Alderman John Barrow. I think I have a second from Alderman Joe Penix, if that suits everyone. Are you okay with that, Joe, to be the second?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
Mr. Barrow, how do you vote?
I vote in favor.
Mr. Apple?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham? Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous. Okay, well, your to-do list is not done yet. All right. All right, shall we move on to item D?
Madam Mayor, item D is a resolution renaming Deer Hitachi Road to John Deere Road. As I said at the last meeting, Deer Hitachi will be renamed to John Deere. That road is currently Deer Hitachi Road. It's the road that runs from Perry Road over to Quality Drive. Perry Road being the road that goes into the older section of Deer Hitachi. Is the one to the furthest to the west. Quality Drive is the one that goes into the plant east near Bodenhammer, and Deer Hitachi Road runs between those. They would like to rename that John Deere Road, primarily because it's no longer Deer Hitachi. Will not impede John Deere.
Okay, is there anyone here that would like to speak to this matter? All right, anyone on the line?
No, Mayor, there are no other callers on the line.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Garner, we haven't heard any controversy about this.
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. All right, do I have a motion or discussion or questions?
I'd make a motion.
I move that we rename the road
Okay, I have a
to
motion.
John Deere.
I have a motion by Alderman Joe Penix. I have a second by, I think I heard Alderman Apple. Right? So I have a motion and a second. Have you got it, Keith?
Yes, thank you.
All right, I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Barrow, how do you vote? In favor. Mr. Apple?
In favor.
In favor. Mr. Gorham?
In favor.
In favor. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. It's unanimous. All right. Item E is consideration of an ordinance for Budget Amendment 5. Mr. Swisher.
You have the budget amendment in your packet, and I covered most of it, I think, at the last meeting, but I'll go over it again in case I left something out. The expenditures, the biggest one of those, $165,000 for central maintenance. Primarily, it covers three things: cost for gasoline, diesel fuel, and subcontracted vehicle repairs. All three of those have went up significantly since we did the budget in July of 2021. We hope that $165,000 will get us through the end of this fiscal year, but I will not guarantee you that it will. The other large increase there is in the recreation department. It's $100,000 to cover the land purchase option cost. That is the land that you just voted to buy. There were two stipulations in the contract: $100,000 at closing, $100,000 90 days after that. So we'll do another budget amendment to cover that other $100,000. That does come off the purchase price, of course, and will be refunded back to us if for some reason we are not able to close on the property. Then you have an increase in the street department, as I said at the meeting, $65,000 to cover salt. We had a couple of snow and ice incidents. We used our salt, 2 salt spreaders. I replaced 2 of them that we were using. The 2 mowers is something that we thought we could repair those mowers. It ended up that they were not worth repairing. So one of them was just sold on Gov Deals. That was one on there with the blowed motor. And the other one will be on Gov Deals probably in the next auction. Then we have a pressure washer, some signs, and crosswalk lights. So that's the 3. We don't have any revenue offsetting any of those expenditures. Be glad to answer any questions that you might have, or any of the department heads associated with that department can answer it as well.
All right. Are there any questions? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second by Alderman Gore.
I have a second by J.R. Gorham. Mr. Barrow, how do you vote? Thank you. Mr. Apple?
I'd vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham?
Vote in favor.
Thank you. I've got 3 in favors in the room. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. It's unanimous. All right. Item F is consideration of a resolution adopting the Town of Kernersville Capital Improvement Plan for fiscal years 2022 to 2023 through 2026 to 2027. Mr. Swisher.
Madam Mayor, as I covered at the briefing, we're required by law to adopt a capital improvement plan, 5-year plan. We're required to adopt one every fiscal year. You have in front of you in your packet the plan. We break it out into 7 different categories: vehicles, equipment, infrastructure, buildings, transportation, and stormwater. And the department heads go through and they put the equipment they think they need, put whatever goes into that category in the years that they project that they will need that. Again, as I said at the last meeting, this is just a projection and a forecast. It is not locked in. You're not set in stone that if you approve this and there's a piece of equipment in the budget for 23-24 that we have to buy that equipment in 23-24. We might buy it in 22-23 if it breaks, just as we just did with one of the mowers. If it's still running fine and doesn't need replacing and another piece of equipment comes up that does, we may push it off a couple of years. But we do try to follow it as close as we can. It gives us a good idea kind of what we're looking at as far as capital expenditures every year for the next 5 years. So we do try to follow that, but as those of you that have been on the board know, with equipment and vehicles especially, it sometimes gets out of order. So you have all those in there. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have about a particular item under any of those categories. I can tell you, as you can see in there, the transportation items, the buildings, those are your expensive items, and they're usually the ones that get pushed off the furthest, especially transportation, because a lot of times that is dependent upon funding from DOT. and they push it off in their capital plans as well. So if it gets pushed off, we push it in ours. But be glad to answer any questions you might have regarding any of that.
Are there any questions?
I got a question on the total transportation capital outlay.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Barrow.
Is that, Curtis, is that money that we have to match the DOT when they're doing our projects, their projects, whose project?
It is those projects, you'll see in there the town portion. You know, the total cost of the project is what it says. That's the total cost. And then we usually match 20%. Sometimes it's not as much of a match, and sometimes we can find another source within DOT to help us so that we don't have a match. So for the transportation projects, we've put the total cost of the project and then our match to that. That match usually stays around 20%. And those are projects, most of them are on DOT roads, and it's projects that are on their roads and so forth. Or sometimes we can get some sidewalks that are, I think, maybe not always on DOT roads that we can do. But there is a match to most of those. But in the past, for instance, the South Main project, that was a 20% match, but we found some other money to help offset that 20% match as well. It just really depends on what pots of money they have available.
Right. And the projects, who comes up with what we're going to do? Do we do that? Do they do that?
Yeah, Alderman Apple is our representative on the TAC board, Ms. Garner and her staff in community development. They come up with some projects. They've been approved by the board in the past, and I think the call for projects is at every 2 years. So every 2 years, we bring projects to the Board of Aldermen. The board approves those projects, and then we submit those to the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, and it goes through that process and ultimately comes down to the TAC board for their approval.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Apple?
Mayor, I just have one comment. I've learned something, if you believe it or not, since serving on this board, beginning to serve on it. And that is that DOT is involved in funding sidewalk projects. I think I had always assumed it's just streets, but I've learned that that's something, and that's great because that means that we're paying for 20% of those in some cases. As Curtis said, occasionally there'll be grants that are specific towards sidewalk improvements, but I had no idea that DOT was involved at all, and it was enlightening to me.
Multimodal. Yes. Cars, pedestrians, and people on bicycles. Although, to our experience in Kernersville, many times you have to advocate for the sidewalk to actually be built. And one of the most important things to having DOT be involved in construction of sidewalks is to have the sidewalk segment on an adopted plan, because without that, there's no way to incorporate it into the road design typically. It makes it a lot easier, but then you actually have to advocate and follow up with it. And the hard thing is if you have a road that stretches across jurisdictions, so you've got the road partly in Kernersville, maybe the other side of the road is Winston-Salem, maybe part of the road goes through the unincorporated county. The trick is so that everything can work together so the entire length of the road that people see has sidewalks on it and not gaps, because part of it's in the county. So it takes a lot of coordination to get that done. But we always, some of those sidewalks I'm very proud of that we did with the DOT. School Street is a sidewalk that the town advocated for and is installed. It runs from Kernersville Elementary School to Nelson Street, if you ever go by there and notice that. So there can be small projects like that and also the bigger projects in connection with the road. But I want to compliment Mr. Apple for taking the time to go to the Transportation Summit in January for the state and meet a lot of people and learn a lot about the NCDOT and road projects and opportunities in our community. And your effort and diligence on the TAC is very much appreciated. All right. Did you have any questions? Okay. Mr. Gore? All right. Mr. Penix and Mr. Thompson, we've gone through capital improvement plans before on prior terms that you've served, but do you have any questions on this plan?
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
No, ma'am, I don't.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, I've got a motion to adopt from Mr. Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second from Mr. Penix. Mr. Barrow, how do you vote? In favor? Mr. Apple?
I vote in favor.
In favor. Mr. Gorham?
I vote in favor.
In favor. Mr. Thompson?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. It's unanimous. All right, moving on to item G, discussion and consideration of a new grant manager position. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, you have in your packet a memo from Franz Ader, our finance director, to myself regarding the grant manager position that's being requested. I covered some of this at the last meeting in the briefing. As what we've seen is the number of grants that the town receives increase over the years. And to date, we received 24 grants this fiscal year, and we anticipate receiving more. And that is in addition to the ARPA funding that we will be receiving. So while that's great, that's good money, not necessarily free money, but it's money that comes into the town that we can utilize for different projects and so forth. All of those grants have a reporting arm to them. Sometimes that reporting is 2 years, sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes it's not very complicated, sometimes it's really detailed. The ARPA money is the same way. Every agency that receives ARPA money has to report how they spend it. They have to report it to us. We have to report it to the federal government. So in the past and currently even, our purchasing and budget administrator is also doing the grants. Just with the way purchasing and budgeting has evolved over the last 2 or 3 years, that is basically a full-time position in and among itself, meaning that grants position now with 24 already this year and probably going to top out over 30 is also one in and among itself. So it's what we're asking the board is for approval of a grants position. We anticipate we would need about $20,000 in ARPA funding, and it is an allowed use of the ARPA funds for the remainder of this fiscal year, and then we can use about $35,000 of the ARPA funds to cover part of next year, and then after that it will roll into the regular budget. You know, we anticipate the department heads do a really good job of getting grants, so we anticipate the number of grants that we receive and after report, we anticipate that continuing to grow every year. And unfortunately, we do not anticipate the difficulty in reporting and tracking those grants to decline. So we see the number going up and the reporting requirements going up as well. And so we really need the position, because the problem is if you don't do the reporting correctly, then you're on the hook to pay the money back in most cases. And we definitely don't want to have to pay $7.9 million back, but we don't want to have to pay $20,000 back either. So, you know, we've got 2 good grants going on as well right now for the Civitan Park over by the fire station. Along with that comes reporting and everything. And the way that works is the department that gets the grant, they apply for the grant and then they get it, but we have one person really do the reporting and the administering of that grant. So we ask for your consideration in that position. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Franz is out in the audience. He can answer any as well from a perspective of the time required in those grants.
Are there any questions? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by J.R. Gorham to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Bill Apple. All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Barrow, how do you vote? In favor. Mr. Apple?
I'd vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. It's unanimous. All right, item H is discussion and consideration of changing off-duty officer pay. Mr. Swisher.
Madam Mayor and Board, you have in your packet a memo from Chief Summers to myself about our current setup for off-duty pay for police officers, and he is asking the board to change that. Currently, our off-duty officers receive $35 for what we call a hustle, and $2 of that goes to the town, and then they get paid in their paycheck. It goes to the finance department and everything. We feel as though the best and easiest way to do that is to let the company that the officer is working the off-duty job for to pay them directly. Takes the town out of it and gets the officer a little bit more money. We feel that's the best way to go. And, you know, our officers now have a lot of off-duty opportunities, and we get a lot of requests for off-duty officers. I will tell you, we're having a hard time filling some of those. We think this will help in that. You know, it'll give them direct pay, get them $2 extra, and so forth. So we're asking the board tonight to allow us to change the way we pay the off-duty officers so that they're just paid directly from their employer for that job.
Are there any questions?
I got a couple of questions, and I probably should have asked this the other day when you briefed us on it. How does this affect their insurance and workers' comp and that kind of thing? Off-duty work.
Yes, my understanding, and Chief Summers or Crystal might be able to answer it better, but it's my understanding they're covered under workers' comp. If say they're working at your law office, you've got a party and you have one there. If someone is there and they're disrupting the place and our officer goes to perform their duty as an officer and remove them from that situation, and they get hurt doing that, they're on our workers' comp because they're performing their duty as an officer. If they're not, if they're there at your place and they fall and get hurt, not performing a duty, then they're on workers' comp of the company that's hired them. I think that's correct. Is that correct? That's the way it's set up. Yep. So that's how it is. They're covered anyway, even if they're off, not working a hustle, and they're acting in their duty as an official officer, they're covered under workers' comp at that point.
My concern, of course, is does it cost the town any more because they work hustles?
No.
In terms of comp and all of that? No.
Not to my knowledge, it does not.
Because they're policemen 24/7, right?
Correct.
We hear that in court all the time. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are there further questions? Do I have a motion?
I move that the officers be paid directly.
All right, I've got a motion by Mr. Penix. I have a second by Mr. Barrow. Mr. Barrow, how do you vote?
I'd vote in favor.
Got in favor by Mr. Barrow. Mr. Apple?
I vote in favor, madam.
In favor, thank you. Mr. Gorham?
I vote in favor.
In favor, thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are to item I, which is related to the earlier motion and unanimous vote to purchase the park. So this is consideration of the submittal of a scope of work proposal to the Office of State Budget and Management for a $1 million state capital and infrastructure fund grant for the purchase of parkland. Mr. Swisher.
Yes, ma'am. The town received a grant for $1 million from the state, and it is specifically for the purchase of parkland. Now, we're recommending that you use it for the parkland that the board just voted to purchase. You certainly don't have to do that, but if you do, it will already find you $1 million toward that $6 million. But if you don't want to use it for that, I don't know of any other land that I would recommend buying right tonight. So we would have to drop back and punt, and I would have to bring you something at the end of the month. But we're recommending using it toward the purchase of the land that the board voted to buy tonight.
And we appreciate the advocacy of Representative Lambeth and Senator Krovic, representing Kernersville in the matter of the state grants. All right, so do I have a motion?
I would move that we
So moved.
approve it.
Okay, I've got a motion by Mr. Apple. I've got a second by Mr. Thompson. Mr. Barrow, how do you vote? In favor, Mr. Apple?
I vote in favor.
In favor, Mr. Gorham?
I vote in favor.
In favor, Mr. Thompson?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's unanimous. All right, the next is item J, consideration of the submittal of a scope of work proposal to the Office of State Budget and Management for a $200,000 state capital and infrastructure grant for the purchase and installation of fire equipment. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, this is also a grant that we received from the state of North Carolina. It is, as it says, $200,000 for fire equipment, and Chief Alderman has listed out the equipment that he desires to purchase with that, and so we recommend approval of that scope of work that we will send in. I will not, unless you really want me to, I will not read out all of the equipment, but I can tell you that it totals $200,000 and it is all fire equipment.
The complete list is available on the Town of Kernersville website as well under this agenda item. Again, we appreciate the advocacy of Representative Lambeth and Senator Krovic. Do I have a motion?
I move approval.
Okay, I've got a motion by Alderman Penix. Do I have a second?
Second by Alderman.
Second.
I've got a second by Alderman Gorham. Mr. Barrow, how do you vote?
I'd vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Apple?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. All right, we are to the town manager's report.
Madam Mayor, I have nothing to report. Well, I do. I have one thing to report. Crystal texted it to me so I wouldn't forget it, and I still about forgot. March is Employee Appreciation Month, so it will be all month. We used to do it about a week, but we've got some other things we're doing this year, so it'll be a month. We'll hand out various tokens of appreciation. We'll have free sandwiches from Subway for all of our employees. We'll also have an Employee of the Year that we will announce later on in the month, and we'll hold an employee service ceremony during the month where we recognize some of our employees. So it's Employee Appreciation Month. Just wanted to let you know that. If you see us out and about, different departments doing things, you'll know what that is related to. Second item I have, you have a motion for closed session. I need to let Alderman Thompson and Alderman Penix know that when we go into closed session, we will disconnect them from the phone call that they're on because, as you know, it's on the speaker, so it wouldn't very well be closed if they're on the speaker. But I will call Alderman Thompson and Mr. Powell will call Alderman Penix, and we will just put them on speakerphone here in the room. So if y'all see a call from us, please answer it.
Okay, and then after the closed session, we'll be going back to open session?
Yes, ma'am. We'll go back into open session. They won't necessarily have to call back in. I don't anticipate any action being taken. After that, if there is, we can leave them on the phone and you can come back into open session.
Okay. All right, so for a closed session, citizens and staff not involved in the closed session, well, no citizens would be involved in the closed session, but any staff not involved in the closed session would leave. And then when it becomes open session again, they could come back in. All right. Do you have anything further?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Okay. Other than the closed session, Mr. Powell, do you have anything this evening?
Madam Mayor, I do not have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham?
Yes, Curtis, those employees appreciation activities that you're going to have during this month, is there a place where you will be coming together collectively so that maybe if someone on this board might want to come and just say thanks to the employees here in Kernersville, that we get that opportunity?
I think we'll have them Crystal, how are you doing that? He's asking, is there one central place where all the employees will be coming so that the board members can come and give them appreciation, show thanks for what they've done? Yeah, if you don't mind. Crystal's organized it, and honestly, she just kind of tells me where to go and when to be there. So, and I listen well.
This is our HR Director, Crystal Tanner.
Thank you, and I will report that he listens well. So throughout this month, we do have several different things planned. One thing I did not put on the list is we're going to have food trucks coming various days. I will be happy to send you a list of where we will be and kind of what all's going on. So if you would like to show up and say thank you, please feel free. And if you got any other questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Are there other questions of Ms. Tanner at this time? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Gorham?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Apple? Thank you. Mr. Barrow?
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
Madam Mayor, I would just like to reiterate, I think that the vote that we took on the land purchase to join Ivy Redmond Park, I think that was a historic vote. And I think that it says a lot for this Board of Aldermen. It makes me proud to serve with them, that it was a unanimous vote. They have the future of Kernersville in their hands, and they proved it tonight, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
I have one thing that you may be touching on, but yeah, with the Rotary Club. Are you going to touch on that? If you are, I have nothing else.
The Rotary Club organized with their Interact Club. So the president of the Interact Club at East Forsyth High School and the president of the Rotary Club, the Rotary Club is an adult service organization, but there's the Interact Club, which is at Glenn High School and at East High School. And so the president of the Interact Club at East High School, the president of the Rotary Club at Glenn High School, and the Kernersville Rotary Club, which is the sponsoring organization, work together. So youth and adults came out to the cemetery and cleaned up the graves with a significant number of leaves collected and trash collected. And we did get a note from the Rotary Club expressing appreciation to Town of Kernersville Public Services staff for working with them as to where to put the leaves, and appreciation for the town collecting the leaves and being in support of that project. So I was considering having some pictures of the cleanup event at our next Board of Aldermen meeting. But Mr. Thompson, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, that's it. I understand it was a great partnership with 25 to 30 adults and kids out there, high school kids, and it's a great project at St. Paul Cemetery. So thank you, Mayor Morgan.
It was, and it had good support from local businesses donating coffee, just donating breakfast biscuits, and the students worked very hard. They had set aside a rather lengthy amount of time to do the work, and they finished a couple hours early with the project. So it is the first time that there's been a joint project from the East Forsyth High School Interact Club and the Glenn High School Interact Club, and the presidents of both clubs visited the Rotary Club meeting earlier to talk about the project, and just very good support from the Kernersville Rotary Club for that project.
Madam Mayor, if I may, if it's appropriate.
Go ahead.
May I suggest to the mayor that she consider maybe having the president of each Interact Club and the Rotary chairman of the project come to our next meeting for appropriate recognition in public?
Let's do that. Let's plan to put it on the agenda. I'll check with the people involved and see which meeting works better for them.
Thank you.
All right. Did you have anything else, Mr. Thompson?
No, ma'am, that's everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I did want to say happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. And I always enjoy hearing about the leprechaun traps that are constructed at our local preschools and kindergartens. And I always look forward to the coverage in the Kernersville News detailing the efforts to catch that elusive guy and maybe find his pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And also, on a more serious note, I do want to express appreciation to the staff of the town of Kernersville, especially even this year as the pandemic comes with one wave after another, the adapting to the technologies we've needed to continue to run these meetings smoothly, including tonight with kind of a new format for us. The innovation, the efforts to work on obtaining grant funding, the efforts that have resulted in recognition of the town of Kernersville as an excellent place to work in the state, recognition of our parks, recognition of our stormwater projects, and the outstanding professional certifications that our various departments have earned. I think the Board of Aldermen gives the town manager and the town attorney and the town departments very good direction and shows a lot of support for the efforts. But we really work well together with ideas coming from the board and also coming from our staff to make this community a really great place to live, a place we're proud to call home. Okay. All right. We will be in open session after our closed session, but right now, can I have a motion to go into closed session?
Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3, I move that the board go into closed session to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged and pursuant to A5 regarding a contract concerning the purchase of real property.
I have a motion by Mr. Gorham. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. All those in favor? Well, I do a roll call. My apologies. Mr. Barrow? Thank you. Mr. Apple?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Gorham?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. It's unanimous that we are now in closed session. Kernersville Board of Aldermen. Is there any business to discuss in open session this evening? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? I have a motion by J.R. Gorham. I have a second by Chris Thompson. I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Barrow? Mr. Barrow's in favor. Mr. Apple?
I'm in favor.
In favor. Mr. Gorham? In favor. Mr. Penix? Mr. Penix has left the meeting. Mr. Thompson? In favor. The vote is 4-0 in favor of adjournment. Thank you for joining us. This meeting is now adjourned.